All right, Portland. I don't even know where to start. It was really hot. We started out Saturday. I think we were in second or third place. Made it through a good portion of the day, and then we had developed a misfire problem with the car. Pulled it into the hot pits. Alec and I pulled the plugs out and put a new set in and cured the issue, went back out, but still cost us 9-something minutes. So that dropped us into, I want to say, 24th place. And we worked our way back up to 5th, but everybody in front of us was basically on the same pace as we were. So we weren't going to make up, I think we might have been 4 or 5 laps off of the lead. There was just no way to make it up. So, I mean, we stuck with it and kept trying because you never know. I mean, a team in front of you could have a similar issue, and you get bumped up a place because of that. And that's what happened to us at Pacific, actually. So, we're really just there to have fun. We're not there to pick up awards. They're nice to get, but not required. Anyway, we finished 5th. Everybody had a good time. Did a little bit of maintenance in the car, just bled the brakes, just because it was so warm. We weren't using the brakes super hard. We had to pedal the car a bit to keep thermals, coolant temp and oil temp in check. So we just weren't braking that hard. But bled the brakes, checked all the fluids, tire pressure, stuff like that, and put the car cover on and called it a night. We were also crewing for another team, 981, and gave their car the same treatment. Pulled data on both cars, reviewed everything to make sure there weren't any issues. It all looked good. So then Sunday, I started the race in 3rd position. I think by lap 2 or 3, managed to make a pass under braking into turn 1, get into 1st place, and we basically held 1st place for 5 hours. And at one point we were 3 laps up on the rest of the field, or the leader behind us. And so we're like, oh, well, we've got this one in the bag. And I am here to tell you that is not how it went. The first issue was I get a radio call from Dave, one of our drivers, and he's like, hey, there's some smoke coming. I heard a clunk, and there's some smoke coming out of the front right. And so he limps the car back around to the pits. He has a flat tire, and then I noticed he also has about 10 degrees of negative camber. So my first thought was the ground control the camber plate, either was loose or failed or something there. So popped the hood, that looked fine, no obvious issue there. So then we turned our attention to the lower connection point of the strut, where that's the only place camber could really change. And the 2 lower bolts that attach the shock to the knuckle were gone. And so there's a 3rd bolt on the 90-degree axis to that, so it allows it to pivot, and that's where the camber came from. But it kept it attached, luckily. So, fortunately, another shout out to Purple Haze. We checked the pits, and a bunch of people tried to help us, but Purple Haze actually had the correct parts. And so they gave us those bolts. We got them in. It was like an 18-minute, 19-minute pit stop, something like that. So, no chance of getting on the podium after that. But got the bolts in, got the driver back out, and everything was okay with the car. So then put the next driver in after that stint finished. He goes out. He's halfway through his stint. I get a radio call. Hey, the throttle just went away. And so right now it's 101 degrees outside, and we're just like, what is going on? And so he coasts all the way around back into the pits, comes in, and we check the throttle cable. It has a VAC Motorsport manual throttle conversion on our S54. And we checked the throttle cable, and it has some pretty extreme angles on it. I don't love the design of it. It bends the throttle cable quite a bit. And so my first thought was the throttle cable broke or it sawed through the housing. So I check it and I'm like, okay, we have a bigger issue here. So we get some fans on the driver while we're dealing with it. We pull the plenum off the car so we can actually see the throttle linkage on the throttle bodies, and the arm, the pivot arm that the throttle actually hooks to, the throttle cable, had popped off of its bearing that it rides on. And it's just a press fit onto that bearing. There's no physical retention other than that press fit. And with the day being 101 degrees and the car being hot and just everything super hot, the aluminum expanded enough to just pop off of the bearing. And so we lost the throttle. So grabbed a hammer and a socket, tapped it back on, and then we rounded up some oversized fender washers to retain it so it couldn't come off, which is probably how it should be in the first place. Put it all back together, send the driver out. So, I mean, I don't know how many more laps we dropped, but I mean, we're so far out of contention at this point. It was just like, well, let's just take our time, make sure everything's good, and have fun for the rest of the day. And so driver goes out, finishes his stint. I was next up. I get in the car. I don't know how many laps. I was actually most of the way. I was 50 minutes into my stint, and they were doing, because it was so hot, they were requiring 1 hour driver changes. I'm like 10 minutes from the end of my stint. I get a radio call to be ready to come in anytime if we get a caution. And so I acknowledge that. Coming down the front straight, cut the gators on turn 1, and I hear a loud clunk, and I'm like, what is that? And so I come around, I do it again, but this time I avoid all the curbing, just to make sure. I was thinking maybe it was a sway bar drop link or something like that was causing it. But in the back of my mind, what I was worried about is it's the same failure we experienced on the right side is happening on the left side now. And so avoid all the curbing coming into turn 1, and under heavy braking, I get another pop. And so I radio in and I tell the guys I'm going to come in this lap. The window's open, it's fine to pit, and at least we can check it and just make sure there isn't a bigger problem happening. So I come in, hop out of the car, we do the driver change, everything, and then we jack the car up, and Alec grabs the wheel and he's shaking it around trying to figure out what's going on, and there's nothing obvious. It takes a lot more force than you can use with your hands to do anything or to cause this problem. And so Alec wiggles it while I'm looking underneath, and I look at the bolts that had come out on the other side, and they're fine, and they're all torque sealed, and so it's kind of mysterious how those came out in the first place on the other side. However, while I'm looking at that, I noticed that our subframe has failed, and the inner ball joint for the control arm is tearing out of the subframe. So I gave it when it wasn't completely out. But I can only see one side of the subframe, and it's captured there's a nut on the top, and the coil comes up from the bottom. So I can see that the bottom is probably 60% torn around the mount and coming out. And so I tell Dave, who's in the car at this point, I was like, hey, if you want to go out and run some 2-minute laps, just for 15 laps, and just go really easy on the car, we can finish the race. However, it's possible this will fail completely. And at that point, we just made the team decision that retire the car, not risk having an accident or causing somebody else some grief because we have an accident. So we drove the car behind the pit wall, started packing up, and that was the race for us. We did get an award, however, not qualifying. The first session of the day when I started, we set the fastest lap time of the day, and that was in cool temperatures, and there's other cars there that can run faster than us for sure. Screaming Chickens, I think they ran a 26 in qualifying, and I put down I think a 27.4 or 27.5 in the first session on Sunday, so it was a good lap time. But Superdog was 27. Nobody Superdogged all weekend. Just the temperatures were just too hot. And I think we started with a 45 car field and finished maybe 13 cars finished. So there was a lot of attrition this weekend, a lot of heat related problems, a lot of differential transmission failures, a lot of wheel bearing failures, just stuff that not having a diff cooler or a trans cooler you can get away with on the periphery seasons, but in the middle of summer in an endurance race when it's 100 plus degrees out, it takes a toll on your car, and that's where having all the coolers and the proper equipment really pays off. So this was the last race for our current motor. So new motor's going together right now. It's going to go in the car. New subframe's going to go in the car with reinforcements on it. If we have time, we'll do the fuel system updates, but fuel system was great. Tilt and clutch was fantastic all weekend. No issues from that. So, and they actually reached out to us today just to make sure everything went well. So appreciate that, guys. Yeah, and then, yeah, all the stuff FuelSafe sent us for the fuel tank, that fixed the issue. So yeah, everything went well. I mean, it wasn't the result we wanted, but everybody had a good time, and everybody, no accidents, no penalties. So overall, good race, but didn't get on the podium. But we did get the bracket award. That's for that fastest lap time, getting as close to Superdog without going over as possible. So anyway, thanks for watching. Had a good time, and we'll keep you posted on the updates for ORP, which is our next event I believe it's the last weekend of July. I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but it's coming up quick, so we got a lot of work to do.